On February 27, 2026, engineers at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena sent a routine command to Voyager 1, a small roll maneuver, the kind of adjustment the spacecraft had performed hundreds of times over nearly 5 decades of flight. It should have been unremarkable. Instead, the power levels on board dropped. Not catastrophically, not in a way that would alarm anyone unfamiliar with just how thin Voyager 1's margins had become. But on a spacecraft where every fraction of a watt is already accounted for, any unexpected drop is not a minor inconvenience. It is a crisis. Because built into Voyager 1's nearly 50-year-old electrical system is an automated fault protection mechanism, a piece of 1970s engineering that, if triggered, does not wait for permission from Earth. It begins shutting down systems on its own, immediately, in whatever order its original programming dictates, with no regard for which instruments the mission team had spent years carefully prioritizing. And, because Voyager 1 sits roughly 16 billion miles from Earth, every command takes about 23 hours to reach it, and every response takes another 23 hours to come back. By the time engineers even learned something had gone wrong, the automated system could already have been acting on its own for nearly a full day. That single moment on February 27th set in motion a chain of decisions that has led to one of the riskiest procedures ever attempted on a spacecraft in the history of space exploration. A plan the engineers themselves nicknamed the Big Bang, and a race against a very literal, very unforgiving deadline, because the machine they are trying to save is dying, slowly, on a schedule dictated not by chance but by the unbending physics of radioactive decay. To understand why a single power dip could trigger this level of alarm, you have to understand what Voyager 1 actually is today, not the romanticized version people picture when they think of golden records and messages to the stars, but the physical reality of an aging machine running on borrowed time. Voyager 1 launched on September 5, 1977, 16 days after its twin, Voyager 2. Its primary mission was designed to last 4 years, enough time to fly past Jupiter in 1979 and Saturn in 1980, returning images and data that reshaped planetary science. It was never built with the expectation that it would still be transmitting data 49 years later, and yet it never stopped. It kept sending information back across an ever-expanding gulf of empty space, and the small, shrinking team at JPL, many of them younger engineers who had to learn programming languages from the 1970s just to communicate with the spacecraft, kept finding ways to keep it alive. The reason Voyager 1 is dying has nothing to do with mechanical failure and everything to do with a decay curve that was written into the spacecraft's design the moment it left Earth. Voyager 1 is powered by 3 radioisotope thermoelectric generators, devices that convert heat from the natural radioactive decay of plutonium-238 into usable electricity. At launch, those generators produced approximately 470 watts of power. Today, in 2026, they produce somewhere around 240 to 250 watts, roughly half of what the spacecraft started with. Plutonium-238 has a half-life of about 87.7 years, meaning the heat output declines steadily and predictably, losing around 4 watts of usable power every single year, with no way to reverse or even pause that decline. It is one of the most quietly brutal countdown clocks in all of space exploration, ticking without pause, indifferent to how badly scientists want more time. Because of that relentless decline, mission engineers have had to make painful choices for years now, shutting down instrument after instrument to preserve enough power for the systems the spacecraft cannot survive without. Its heaters, its transmitter, and the computer systems that format data before sending it across 16 billion miles of vacuum. Of the 10 scientific instruments Voyager 1 originally carried, 7 had already been switched off before this latest crisis even began. Not because they had broken, though a few eventually did, but because there simply wasn't enough power left to run them alongside everything else. Years earlier, the Voyager science and engineering teams had sat down together and mapped out, in advance, exactly which instruments would go dark and in what order. A deliberate, unhurried plan designed to squeeze the maximum possible scientific return out of a machine they knew was fading. It was, in effect, a will written for a spacecraft that was going to die slowly, ensuring that when the end came, every possible measurement had already been taken. That careful plan held for years, right up until the power drop on February 27, 2026, forced the team's hand faster than they had intended. Rather than risk the automated fault protection system triggering on its own and shutting down instruments in an unplanned, potentially damaging sequence, engineers made the difficult decision to act first. On April 17, 2026, NASA sent the command to permanently deactivate the low-energy charged particle instrument, known as the LECP, a device that had been running almost continuously since the day Voyager 1 launched. For 49 years, the LECP had measured ions, electrons, and cosmic rays, both inside the solar system and, since 2012, in interstellar space itself, providing data that has been genuinely irreplaceable because no other instrument anywhere near interstellar space exists to provide it. Voyager Mission Manager. Suzanne Dodd's team described the decision in the kind of careful, restrained language people use when something necessary still hurts. Shutting down a working science instrument, the team acknowledged, was not anyone's preferred outcome. It was simply the best option remaining. With the LECP gone, Voyager 1 was left with only 2 functioning scientific instruments, the plasma wave subsystem, which listens to oscillations in the plasma of interstellar space, and the magnetometer, which measures the strength and orientation of magnetic fields. 2 instruments remained out of the original 10 that once made Voyager 1 one of the most ambitious science packages humanity had ever sent beyond the solar system. But buried inside that shutdown was a small, deliberate detail that hinted at what was coming next. Engineers left a tiny half-watt motor inside the deactivated LECP still running, a component so minor it barely registers against the spacecraft's overall power budget, but left active on purpose as a kind of placeholder, a door held open just slightly in case circumstances ever allowed the instrument to be revived. That possibility is exactly what the Big Bang procedure is designed to create. The concept grew out of a simple but difficult question the engineering team kept circling back to. After shutting off 7 of 10 science instruments, after disabling heaters for components no longer considered essential, after rerouting software years earlier around a corrupted memory chip using programming approaches most engineers alive today have never had to use, where could any additional power possibly come from? The answer the team eventually settled on wasn't to shut off more systems. It was to change how the existing power moves through the spacecraft in the first place. Voyager 1's electrical architecture was designed using early 1970s engineering assumptions, built around a power budget of 470 watts that no longer exists. There are power distribution pathways on the spacecraft, the actual routes electricity takes from the generators to individual systems that made perfectly reasonable sense 50 years ago. But that now represent unnecessary inefficiency at a moment when every fraction of a watt determines whether an instrument stays on or goes permanently dark. The Big Bang is a coordinated, simultaneous reconfiguration of those power pathways, not a gradual one-system-at-a-time adjustment, but a single, all-at-once restructuring of how electricity flows across the entire spacecraft. The reasoning behind doing it all simultaneously rather than incrementally comes down to how the individual changes interact with each other. Reconfiguring just one pathway while leaving the rest in their old state could create a temporary, unstable condition capable of triggering the very fault protection system the team is trying to avoid altogether. By executing every change at once, the spacecraft skips over those dangerous intermediate states entirely, moving directly from its current configuration into the new one without lingering in between. It is, by any honest assessment, an extraordinarily risky maneuver to attempt on a machine pushing 50 years old, with no possibility of physical repair, no backup spacecraft standing by, and a communication delay so long that engineers won't know for nearly 2 full days whether the attempt succeeded or caused irreversible damage. The team has spent months running simulations, checking calculations, and stress testing the plan against edge cases, and before ever attempting it on Voyager 1, they made a deliberate choice to test it first on its twin. Voyager 2 launched 16 days before Voyager 1 in August 1977, but because it followed a different trajectory, one that carried it past Uranus in 1986 and Neptune in 1989 before heading out toward interstellar space, it currently sits closer to Earth than its sibling, at a distance of roughly 13 billion miles compared to Voyager 1's 16 billion. Voyager 2 crossed the heliopause, the boundary marking the outer edge of the Sun's influence, in November 2018, about 6 years after Voyager 1 made that same crossing in August 2012. With slightly more power still available in its own generators, Voyager 2 became the safer, though still far from safe, candidate for testing the Big Bang procedure first. Those tests were scheduled for May and June of 2026. If Voyager 2's power distribution responded the way the team's simulations predicted, if no unexpected fault protection triggered, and if the projected efficiency gains actually materialized, the same reconfiguration would then be attempted on Voyager 1 no earlier than July 2026. Matt Hill, the principal investigator for the LECP instrument at the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory, was candid about how much rides on that attempt. He described hoping the team's latest plan might power the LECP back on aboard Voyager 1, allowing scientists to keep learning whatever surprises still await in these remote regions of space. That phrase, whatever surprises await, is not idle optimism from someone unfamiliar with the mission's history. It reflects a pattern that has repeated itself again and again across nearly 5 decades of Voyager operations, one where nearly every model built in advance turned out to be incomplete the moment real data arrived from beyond the heliopause. Since 2017, Voyager 1's plasma wave subsystem has been detecting something researchers still cannot fully explain: a persistent, steady, narrowband oscillation in the plasma of interstellar space. Unlike a brief burst triggered by a specific solar event, such as a coronal mass ejection sending a pressure wave outward across the heliopause, this is a continuous hum that has shown up in the data year after year, detected across more than 10 astronomical units, well over 900 million miles of interstellar space. The finding was published in the journal Nature Astronomy and has since been examined by multiple independent research teams, and it remains unresolved. Researchers have proposed two competing explanations. One possibility is that the emission comes from thermally excited plasma oscillations, natural vibrations rising as plasma particles interact with their surrounding electromagnetic environment, a phenomenon that could potentially be folded into existing theoretical models with some adjustment. The other possibility is quasi-thermal noise, generated by the random thermal motion of electrons within the plasma, carrying information about density and temperature in a way that would require a more fundamental rethinking of how scientists model the interstellar medium altogether. Telling these two explanations apart isn't simple. It requires either additional, higher resolution data collected over a longer period, or a dedicated future mission built specifically to resolve the question. Until very recently, the now shuttered LECP instrument had been quietly helping constrain these competing models by measuring the surrounding particle environment alongside the plasma wave readings. With LECP offline, that particular crosscheck has effectively vanished, which is exactly why restoring even partial power to it through the Big Bang procedure carries so much scientific weight. The stakes here reach well beyond academic curiosity about a distant hum in the dark. The interstellar medium is, in a very real sense, the ocean our entire solar system moves through. Its density, its turbulence, and its magnetic structure directly shape the size and behavior of the heliosphere, the vast bubble of solar wind that shields every planet, including Earth, from the full force of galactic cosmic radiation. If the interstellar medium proves to be more turbulent or structured differently than existing models assume, then the heliosphere itself is likely more dynamic and variable than scientists have believed, which in turn means the radiation environment that shaped the development of life on Earth may be considerably less stable across long timescales than researchers previously had any direct way of confirming. The heliosphere already expands and contracts across the roughly 11-year solar cycle, and over far longer timescales. As our sun drifts through regions of the galaxy with differing interstellar densities, it has almost certainly undergone dramatic changes with real consequences for radiation levels throughout the inner solar system. Understanding the present state of that medium, as only Voyager 1 is currently positioned to measure it directly, is part of understanding the conditions that made complex life on Earth possible in the first place, and whether those same conditions are likely to remain stable moving forward. This is precisely what makes the absence of any immediate successor mission so consequential. There is currently no spacecraft positioned to take over from Voyager. Voyager 1, once it eventually falls silent, an event current estimates place sometime in the early 2030s, when its dwindling power finally drops below the minimum threshold required to operate any instrument at all. NASA has studied and proposed a dedicated interstellar probe mission, a spacecraft purpose-built to cross the heliopause using modern instruments rather than hardware designed before the invention of the personal computer. The scientific case for such a mission is considered strong within the research community, and support for it is genuine, but as of 2026, it remains unfunded, with no confirmed launch date. Even under the most aggressive trajectory design available, including a powered gravity assist flyby of Jupiter to maximize velocity, a newly launched spacecraft would take approximately 25 years just to reach the heliopause. That means the gap between Voyager 1's final transmission and the arrival of any true replacement at that same boundary isn't measured in months or even a handful of years. It is measured in decades, a stretch of time during which humanity's real-time window into the plasma, magnetic fields, and particle environment of interstellar space would simply go dark, with the unresolved mystery of the persistent hum left incomplete indefinitely. The Voyager team has faced moments that looked very much like the end before, and found their way through more than once. In November 2024, a routine command intended to activate one of Voyager 1's heaters accidentally triggered the spacecraft's fault protection system, causing it to automatically switch from its primary radio transmitter to a backup that had not been used since 1981. 43 years of dormancy for hardware nobody currently on the mission team had ever operated in active service. Engineers at JPL worked through the problem and successfully restored communication using that decades-dormant backup system. Roughly a year earlier, in late 2023, Voyager 1 began transmitting garbled, unreadable data for months on end, a fault eventually traced to a single deteriorated memory chip inside the spacecraft's flight data system, damaged after nearly 5 decades of continuous cosmic radiation exposure. The fix required engineers to rewrite corrupted code around that damaged chip, splitting the affected software into separate sections and storing them across different areas of memory, effectively rebuilding part of the spacecraft's operating logic from a distance of roughly 15 billion miles, communicating through a round-trip delay of close to 2 full days using programming conventions that predate most currently employed engineers' careers. It took months of painstaking work. It worked. Before that, there were thruster firings that succeeded when engineers weren't certain they would, attitude control recoveries that pushed 1970s engineering well past its intended limits, and repeated recalculations of the power budget as the generators continued their slow, unstoppable decline. Across 49 years, this team has repeatedly encountered problems that looked unsolvable on paper, and found a way through them anyway. While the Big Bang procedure moves through testing, Voyager 1 continues its outward journey regardless. And on November 18th, 2026, it is set to reach a milestone no human-made object has ever achieved before. At 2:16 in the morning Pacific Standard Time on that date, Voyager 1 will sit exactly 1 light day from Earth, a distance of roughly 16.1 billion miles, the exact span that light itself, moving at 186,000 miles per second, the fastest speed physically possible in the universe, covers in precisely 24 hours. At that distance, a signal sent from Earth on any given morning will not reach Voyager 1 until the following morning, and whatever response the spacecraft sends back will not arrive on Earth until the morning after that. A single question and answer exchange stretching across a full 48 hours from start to finish. Consider what that means in practical terms for the engineers actually running this mission. Every diagnostic check, every instrument status query, every command adjusting power routing or verifying a system response costs 2 full days in communication time alone before any real analysis of the result can even begin. When the initial power drop occurred during that routine maneuver in February 2026, the team did not learn about it instantly. They sent commands, waited nearly a full day, received a response, analyzed it, sent further commands, and waited again, a process that stretched the investigation across days rather than hours, all while knowing that fault protection could trigger on its own at any moment if they didn't act fast enough. That is the exact environment in which the Big Bang procedure is now being attempted, a maneuver that has never been performed before on hardware older than nearly everyone working on the project. Tested first on one spacecraft and then, if successful, immediately applied to another, separated from mission control by a gulf so vast that not even the speed of light can close it in real time. There is no way around that fundamental limitation. Engineers send their commands, wait roughly 23 hours for confirmation that the signal was even received, and then wait again for a response confirming what actually happened. If something goes wrong along the way, the problem may already have been unfolding, unsupervised, for the better part of a day before anyone on Earth becomes aware it has even started. It's an unusually exposed way to attempt one of the most consequential engineering procedures in the mission's history, but given the alternative, allowing the spacecraft's automated fault protection system to make unsupervised, potentially irreversible decisions on its own, the team concluded that a carefully planned high-risk intervention was still the better option. What makes all of this land with such weight isn't simply the engineering ingenuity involved, impressive as that is on its own terms. It's the realization of exactly what would be lost if the Big Bang procedure fails, or if it succeeds only partially, or if Voyager 1 simply runs out of usable power before any future mission comes anywhere close to replacing what it currently provides. Voyager 1 was never built to make discoveries of this kind. It was built at its core to fly past Jupiter and Saturn, gather what data it reasonably could, and then carry a golden record outward into the void, a collection of sounds, images, and greetings in 55 languages, launched more in hope than expectation that something, someday, somewhere, might eventually encounter it. Nobody designing Voyager 1 in the early 1970s expected it to still be transmitting real scientific data 49 years later. Nobody expected it would detect an unexplained, persistent hum in the plasma between the stars. Nobody expected it would measure temperatures of roughly 54,000 degrees Fahrenheit in a region at the heliopause, once assumed to be cold and largely uneventful, or reveal an unexpected magnetic connection between the Sun's own field and the broader galactic field at that same boundary. Every genuine surprise Voyager 1 has delivered has come from data nobody was entirely certain the spacecraft would still be capable of collecting. Gathered by instruments nobody was entirely certain would still be functioning by the time the readings came in. And now, right now in the summer of 2026, a small team of engineers working out of a building in Pasadena is preparing to attempt the most complex, most consequential power reconfiguration ever performed on a spacecraft operating at true interstellar distances. Guided by a plan they nicknamed the Big Bang, with a single half-watt motor left quietly running as a deliberate placeholder for hope, working through communication delays measured in days rather than minutes, trying to extend the operational life of the only human-made instrument currently sitting in interstellar space for as long as the underlying physics will possibly allow. They have not given up, Not after the power scare in February, not after the LECP shut down in April, and not in the face of a decay curve that offers no negotiation and no reversal. The signal Voyager 1 sends is faint by any ordinary standard, weak enough that it takes some of the largest radio antennas ever built on Earth just to detect it clearly against the background noise of the universe. And yet, across 16 billion miles, across a one-way delay of nearly a full day, that signal keeps arriving, carrying with it measurements from a region of space that no other instrument in human history has ever directly sampled. The Big Bang procedure represents the latest and arguably the most consequential chapter in an unbroken 49-year effort to keep that signal alive just a little longer, to answer just a few more of the questions Voyager 1 itself raised the moment it crossed into interstellar space, and to delay, even briefly, the silence that current projections suggest is still coming sometime in the early 2030s, regardless of how this particular gamble turns out. Whether the Big Bang succeeds on Voyager 2 in June, whether it is subsequently attempted on Voyager 1 in July, and whether the LECP instrument ultimately flickers back to life or remains permanently dark, the outcome will shape not just how much longer this specific spacecraft keeps talking to Earth, but how much of the story of interstellar space itself gets told before the next generation of instruments, still years or even decades away from launch, ever gets the chance to listen for themselves. For now, the spacecraft that was never supposed to outlive its 4-year mission is still out there, still transmitting, still asking questions nobody in 1977 thought to ask, and somewhere between Pasadena and a point in space 1 light day away, the answer to whether it gets to keep asking them is still 11 weeks and one very risky procedure away from being known.